Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at a 9-game win streak that I had in the Open Great League at Leaderboard ELO. After hitting 29-61 ELO the other day, I'll be honest, I had some very tough sets. A combination of opponents making absolutely amazing plays and me just not playing my best left me at about 2800 ELO. I wanted to try a team that I've seen a couple people play, Defense Deoxys, Vigoroth, GUZZLORD. I ended up using Poliwrath instead of Deoxys on the lead. This does make the team ABA weak to Charm, so if you're going to try it, I would probably try the Deoxys version. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches. And we pick up a terrible lead in the first match as I lead the Poliwrath into Mew. I save switch into Vigoroth and my opponent responds with their own. This is pretty nice for me. Not only do I bait out the counter user to hopefully free up that GUZZLORD in the back, but now I can make a play for switch advantage. My opponent is going to fire off the body slam. I'm going to immediately return fire with my own as I want to put pressure on their shield. Opponent is going to commit the shield. I'm more than happy to double shield here and take switch advantage because typically Mew is going to be running Wild Charge and then either Surf or Flame Charge, so their energy should be completely walled by the GUZZLORD. I continue to farm up here, going for the body slam, but I do lose charge attack priority. Mew picks up the knockout with the Wild Charge. In comes GUZZLORD in the back. It's Mandibuzz, and at this point, I have this game won. Poliwrath, even though it's taking super effective damage here from Aerial Ace, will be able to debuff and chip enough with Icy Wind that I'm going to be able to take this. Opponent is going to recognize that, and they resign the match. The tough leads continue in the next match as I lead Poliwrath into Jellicent. I'm going to stay in this match to start and look to try and go for a Shadow Ball catch onto the Vigoroth. So I farm up, switch into the Vigoroth, but my opponent is much too patient, holding on to the energy. Now they have a massive energy advantage versus the Vigoroth. They go for Surf number 1, immediately followed by Surf number 2. I am not going to be shielding the Vigoroth, and I'm just looking to farm up on energy. Opponent now makes a very interesting switch as they're going to send in Ferrothorn. So Ferrothorn, of course, is taking super effective damage from the counters, but Ferrothorn is a complete wall to the charge moves of Vigoroth. So for the opponent here, they're actually going to be pretty okay in this matchup. They're going to be firing off a move. I'm just going to let this go because at this point, my Vigoroth is basically KO'd. And now I can send in the Poliwrath. Poliwrath gets a perfect farm down. And look at the energy on the Poliwrath here. Oh my goodness. They're probably going to be sending in that Jellicent. They do. I immediately switch into the GUZZLORD. GUZZLORD continues to farm in the back. It is Bastiodon. And this is really not great for me. Maybe I should have tried to play for switch in the mid game, as now I'm stuck in very unfavorable alignment. The good news is, however, is that the switch clocks are slightly misaligned, and I had a pretty nice energy lead here. I go for the crunch. It is charge attack priority. My opponent is going to let that through, and I'm going to be shielding. I need to protect the GUZZLORD to win this game. I have a massive amount of energy available on the Poliwrath. I'm firing off another crunch. Is the switch clock going to be up yet? It is. In comes the Poliwrath. We get the snipe. They weren't able to switch. In comes the Jellicent, and I'm going to be shielding everything here. And then I'm going to start going for Icy Wind after Icy Wind after Icy Wind. Icy Wind on Poliwrath, just absolutely devastating for opponents to deal with. I'm firing off Icy Wind number 2. They're forced to start shielding, but shielding Icy Winds when they're resisted is an extremely unfortunate spot to be in. They go for the Shadow Ball. Poliwrath simply does not care. We're going for Icy Wind number 3. This thing is absolutely horrifyingly strong. I send in the GUZZLORD. The opponent only has resisted charge moves, and they're extremely debuffed, so they resign the match. Great lead in the next match, Poliwrath into Diggersby, but my opponent save switches into Charm, Alolan Ninetales, and it looks like my double weak to Charm team is going to go up against double Charm. I build up to the Scald, bait with the Icy Wind, and now I'm going to send in Vigoroth. I'm going to be shielding up here as Vigoroth is definitely going to be a big key to victory. I'm going to throw not 1 in the move, but 2 in the move. My opponent did get a Charm through, but since this KOs, the Charm doesn't register, so I just get energy without taking any extra damage. In the back, what do you know? It's another Charmer, and this is looking really rough. I go for the Body Slam. I will be able to make another Body Slam before my opponent is able to get a farm down. My opponent is going to switch in the Diggersby. Oh my goodness, I'm very low on health, but the switch clock will be up soon. And it comes up in the perfect amount of time as I can save a Body Slam and send in the GUZZLORD. And now there's a win con. I have to make sure that I exit this matchup with a Crunch, as Crunch is going to be doing quite a lot of single resisted damage to the Wigglytuff. and my opponent is not going to be able to shield it, knowing that I have a Body Slam. I continue to farm up with the GUZZLORD, making sure I get to the back-to-back crunches, and I'm going for the Dragon Claw. Dragon Claw will pick up the knockout. In comes the Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff is going to be hit with the crunch. Crunch, not going to be enough to KO. Wigglytuff gets the charm down. I can send in the Poliwrath, and despite being ABA weak to charm, I'm able to defeat double charm. We see an amazing lead in the next match, Poliwrath into Lickitung. Opponent save switches into Cresselia, and here I arguably should have gone into the GUZZLORD. Most Cresselias that I've been seeing in the Great League have been running Grass Knot and Future Sight, which means they would be completely walled by the GUZZLORD. However, I was very worried that this might be the one Cresselia that had Moonblast, so I decided to send in the Vigoroth. Cresselia definitely a bit of a problem spot for this team, but the good news is this team is triple strong against Lickitung. So wherever the Lickitung gets aligned, it's not really going to be a problem for me. They're going to be able to pick up a knockout with the Grass Knot. I've now seen both their charge moves, so I can send in the GUZZLORD and just fully commit to a farm down. Everything they throw here is going to be resisted. Opponent is going to go for the Future Sight. That is heavily resisted. That does absolutely nothing. And I get a massive energy head start with the GUZZLORD. Opponent sends in the Lickitung, understanding it has nowhere to run. I go for the crunch, looking for the debuff. No debuff to be seen. That's a bit unfortunate. And I continue to farm up with the GUZZLORD. Unfortunate timing from the opponent as I do get a Dragon Tail for free. Body Slam is going to connect. I'm farming up to the back-to-back Dragon Claws. And here I had a bit of a dilemma. Do I bank the move and switch, or do I throw the move? I decide to throw the move here because I can guarantee either a knockout or shield advantage. My opponent decides to let this through. In the back, they have Lantern, and it might look a little strange to send in a Poliwrath into a negative matchup, but again, this is their final Pokemon. They have no way to reset Icy Wind debuffs. So now I can show Poliwrath at its most toxic, shielding everything from the Lantern, debuffing more and more and more, and again, putting an opponent in a situation where they're forced to shield resisted Icy Winds, which is an extremely unfortunate feeling. I continue to farm. At this point, I think I just saved the shield for the GUZZLORD. I've gotten it low enough. Thunderbolt is going to pick up the knockout, but I can just send in the GUZZLORD. Opponent needs back-to-back charge moves to win, and they are unable to get there. Hopping into the next match, leading Poliwrath into Whiscash. Despite the fact that this is a type-neutral matchup, this is a good lead for the Poliwrath. Opponent save switches into Trevenant, and boy, do we have the Anti-Trevenant technology. In comes the GUZZLORD. GUZZLORD, very nice in its ability to shut down both Lantern and Ghost types like Trevenant. I decided to just full send the crunch here. In the Great League, GUZZLORD, as you can see, takes a lot of damage from the Shadow Ball, so I don't want to let them make it to a second move. Is my opponent going to be sending in the Whiscash here? Yes, they are. My opponent, unfortunately, if I try and throw in good timing here, they would be able to fire off a Mud Bomb on good timing, so I'm going to go for the crunch and actually just throw it on alignment. So they do get a Mud Shot for free, but I get some very valuable chip damage onto the Whiscash. The Mud Bomb is going to pick up the knockout. I send in the Poliwrath, and in the back, it's going to be Cresselia. Now, Cresselia, a bit of an awkward spot for me to be in here, considering I only have Vigoroth and the Poliwrath left. And there's a Moonblast Cresselia. There we go. What I was worried about earlier, it's out there. They're kind of rare, but they're out there. A Cresselia that is not running Future Sight. They are running Moonblast. But considering I do have the Vigoroth and shields, I should be in a pretty nice position here. Because my opponent cannot pick up a knockout with one charge move. So after shielding one, I can let this next one go. It is going to be the Grass Knot. And I'm just going to continue to chip away at the HP of the Cresselia with Body Slams. Opponent is going to let that through. At this point, this is probably just counter down range. So I am going to let this go. Cresselia is going to go for the Grass Knot. I survive. Opponent makes a nice catch onto the Whiscash. I will go for an undercharge here, so now I can go for massive farm on the Poliwrath. Energy from the Whiscash is not threatening here. What's going to knock out is a move from the Cresselia. But since I undercharged, I'm going to get a massive energy head start, and with this much energy, there's just nothing the Cresselia can do, and the opponent resigns the match. The tough leads return in the next match, leading Poliwrath into Shadow Gligar. I save switch into Vigoroth, and my opponent has their own Poliwrath, but there's a Shadow. The only Shadow Poliwrath that I have, unfortunately, still has Frustration, so until we get one of those Frustration events, I'm going to be using the regular. But the good news is the regular is still awesome. My opponent goes for the Icy Wind, and I decide to commit the shield. The reason being is they're probably going to want to keep switch, so they're going to shield back, and getting one shield down is very important for the next part of my plan. Here, I also don't throw a counter. If you notice there, I stopped tapping, so now I can get extra farm on my own Poliwrath. because now I'll be able to outpace their Gligar, make it to an Icy Wind, and they'll have a choice: give up the final shield or take double super effective damage. Now, they did debuff me with an Icy Wind, so this is going to be doing less damage than it typically would, but it's still a double super effective move. I land the Icy Wind, send in the GUZZLORD, and in the back it's Skarmory. This is really not good. I go for the crunch, and I accidentally throw on alignment as well. Due to the switch, the visuals slightly threw me off, and now I'm in an awkward spot. I'm at a shield. My opponent will outpace if I try and throw on good timing, so I just have to throw the move as soon as I get it now. If my opponent shields and then goes for a Sky Attack, potentially I can counter down and make it to an Icy Wind, but my opponent is going to let it go, and now they're in a difficult spot. They're running out of HP. Opponent goes for the Aerial Ace. They're going to try and get a Wing Attack, farm down, but it's a simultaneous KO, and with Poliwrath left alive in the back, I take the win. After those first 7 games, I decided to go to bed. It was very, very late at night, so now we resume with our next battles the next morning. And we see a bit of an awkward lead here. Poliwrath into Altaria. I'm going to grab a shield with an Icy Wind, save switch into the Vigoroth, and my opponent is going to respond with Charge-a-Bug. So they do not have a great response to Vigoroth. I fire off the Rock Slide. Opponent is going to commit the shield. I continue to farm up with the Vigoroth. Opponent is at back-to-back moves here. I know an X-Scissor is not going to knock out, so I actually go for a no shield, and then I go for the Rock Slide on charge attack priority, anticipating that they would throw back-to-back. The Rock Slide connects, and now I'm perfectly fine with letting this through. My opponent is going to go for an undercharge on the X-Scissor, and they're going to leave with energy. I decide to send in the Poliwrath here, and you know what? I'm going to go for a catch. We're going to catch the discharge onto the GUZZLORD. I still haven't used my 2 shields yet in this game, so I am holding on to those shields, and it's a good thing too, because that Altaria banked a bunch of energy, so I will commit the shield as they fire off the Sky Attack. GUZZLORD farming up. These Dragon Tails are doing a lot of damage to the very bulky Altaria. I make the Dragon Claw. That gets Altaria low. One more Dragon Tail picks up the knockout. What does my opponent have in the back? We know they still have the very low health Charge-a-Bug. What is it going to be? And it's Lantern, and things are looking really, really nice for GUZZLORD. I'm going to be shielding up here. Normally, you don't have to shield this matchup, but I just have no HP left, basically. I'm going to fire off the Crunch. My opponent is going to make the next Surf on charge attack priority to my next move. I'm going to anticipate they go for the catch, so I switch. They do go for the catch as they try and go for the Charge-a-Bug, and now they send in the Lantern. I'm able to make it to the Icy Wind. Icy Wind gets them to 1 HP. They're forced to fire off the Thunderbolt here to pick up the knockout, and then they just don't have any energy remaining, so 1 Dragon Tail from the GUZZLORD is going to secure the win. Poliwrath seeing some awkward leads as it's now going to lead into a Lantern. I'm going to save switch into Vigoroth. Vigoroth is incredibly strong on the switch. My opponent stays in with the Lantern to try and get some chip damage, but before they're able to make a Surf, I already have a Body Slam, and that's suddenly a much more manageable health range if I have to get rid of the Lantern with Poliwrath later on. My opponent is now going to send in their own Vigoroth. I'm only going to make it to 1 move, so I will go for the Rock Slide. The damage between Rock Slide and Body Slam is fairly comparable. Body Slam, of course, is going to be a lot cheaper. My opponent actually intentionally does not throw fast moves there. They don't want to give a lot of farm to the Poliwrath, so they let themselves get very low. The switch clocks are misaligned, however. So when my opponent sends in the Lantern, because they stayed in and 2 charge moves were thrown in the mid game, I can immediately go to GUZZLORD, and they're still stuck here. I'm able to fire off this Dragon Claw. This is going to be grabbing a shield, and my opponent's Lantern is now in a range where I can very comfortably get rid of it with the Poliwrath. In the back, they have a Powder Snow Alolan Sandslash. Not the greatest thing ever, but I have a shield advantage and a lot of energy, and that Crunch does so much damage. My opponent continues to farm. I'm able to make the Dragon Claw. Dragon Claw forces the final shield, and now I just don't have to shield the GUZZLORD. I can just win this game with the Poliwrath. Ice Punch is going to pick up the knockout, but I can send in the Poliwrath. My opponent has energy on the Lantern, but they're going to need to make 2 charge moves to win this game, and that's just not going to happen. The only way they win is if they just full send the Thunderbolt here. They go for the Surf Bait, but a Bait will not allow them to outpace, as I am going to make it to the Icy Wind, and Icy Wind is going to pick up the knockout. We've seen it a lot of times in these battles. Poliwrath beating things that should beat it, and we take the game. All win streaks must come to an end, so let's take a look at how this one ends. We start with a very nice lead here, leading the Poliwrath into the Whiscash. Whiscash is going to be firing off the Mud Bomb, and I'm going to let this go. If they're running Whiscash, they could very well have something like a Skarmory in the back, which is a bit awkward for my backline. I go for the Icy Wind, opponent is going to let that through. I try and go for the catch onto Vigoroth, but my opponent is going to hold on to that energy and send in Gligar. I'm farming up with the Vigoroth and firing off the Body Slam. Body Slam is going to do some nice chip damage, and here I'm going to make mistake number one. A Dig does not knock out from this range, so I don't need to shield this, but I shield, and not only do I shield, but I shield a bait as well. And now, at this point, they've done enough wing attacks that a Shadow Dig is going to be able to knock out. I decide to let this go. I'm going to be saving the shield, but I have not played this mid-game well. I send in the GUZZLORD. Opponent is going to be able to make it to another Dig, and at this point, I'm just in an immense amount of trouble, especially if it is going to be the Skarmory in the back, and it is. So this is a game that very easily could have been a win, but misplays in the mid-game, just poor use of shields. I can send in the Poliwrath, but I mean, the Skarmory is just going to win this game for them. I can let this Mud Bomb go. They're going to make another Mud Bomb. They banked a ton of energy. I'm forced to burn a shield. I can try and leave with as much energy as I possibly can, but I'm low enough that a Steel Wing is probably going to knock out here. I go for the Icy Wind. Icy Wind is going to pick up the shield. I am unable to make the move, and I resign the match. And I do have a bonus battle in here. This was the battle after the win streak ended when I lost to Ventusky, but I did want to include this battle as an example of how you can overcome core breakers to your team. So first off, we start with not a bad lead, Poliwrath into the Shadow Dragonite. I grab a shield and a debuff, and I'm going to send in the Vigoroth. I do want to respect a potential superpower. Even when debuffed, it hits very, very hard. I'm going to look to overfarm, opponent firing off more energy. I'm going to be committing the shield, so the opponent had successfully grabbed 2 shields off of me here, and I'm going to undertap the Body Slam, expecting that my opponent was not going to want to switch there. My opponent does commit the shield. I continue to farm. They make a very nice catch as they catch onto a Azumarill. And now you can see what I was talking about here. Azu is so bad for this team. Poliwrath and, of course, the Vigoroth both get absolutely crushed by it. I'm going to be firing off the Body Slam. Body Slam is going to connect. I continue to farm with the Vigoroth. My opponent not going to let me make it to another move as they're going to be firing off the Ice Beam. I'm going to send in the Poliwrath, and I'm farming up energy here, and this is just going to be trying to do as much damage as I possibly can to get it as low as I can to try and win the game with the GUZZLORD. The Scald connects, opponent is over farming, and by virtue of a lot of resisted and neutral damage, I've managed to get this thing low. I send in the GUZZLORD, in the back is Lickitung, and this is winnable. My opponent shouldn't have a move banked on the Dragonite, and the Dragonite should be in a range where one Dragon Tail should knock out. However, if I can leave with a Dragon Claw loaded, that would honestly be preferable. So I think my plan is going to be to go for double Dragon Claw, but actually undercharge one of them, so that way hopefully I can leave it in a range where I can farm down and leave with a move. So I am going to farm up here. Now I'm looking to go for an undercharge to put it into a range where one Dragon Tail KOs, but I mess up the undercharge. They barely survive it, and I'm forced to fire off my energy. I'm pretty sure the Dragonite doesn't have a move, but if they do, I lose. Let's see. Opponent, they're thinking about it. They send in the Dragonite. It doesn't have a move, and we're going to double resisted Dragon Tail down the Azu and take the win. As I mentioned at the start, this is a very unbalanced version of the team. The more balanced version of the team that I would recommend has the Defense Deoxys lead, as Deoxys, of course, is able to better handle stuff like Charm that the GUZZLORD really does not want to see. Running unbalanced teams sometimes can have success in terms of the fact that opponent is not expecting you to run an unbalanced team, but overall, running the more classically balanced version of the team with Deoxys will probably serve people better in the long run. I have just been really loving getting to use Poliwrath, so I wanted to run it, and it ended up working out. As you can see, Poliwrath's energy is just so hard to punish, and it can overcome some matchups where realistically it should have no business winning. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.